It's good. It's good to be with you. Part of the reason I'm really glad to be here because it gives me the opportunity to put to death a very nasty rumor that goes around sometimes, which is that Doug Ponder and I are the same person. And so Doug's back there. Wave, Doug. Say hey. See, we're not the same person. So there you go. Problem solved. Let's pray, and then we'll jump in. Father, I thank you for your grace to us. I thank you that you've been with us so far, and I pray that as we consider the virtue of courage, that you would give us wisdom and grace to understand and apply it for all of us. Help us to see the beauty of this virtue, the Christian boldness and courage that you call us to have, especially in this present day. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so my goal, gendered virtue, is I'm going to talk about courage, and I suspect, let's just see. How many of you would say that if we're talking about gendered virtue, courage is a masculine virtue? Raise your hands. Hi, come on. Okay, second, okay. How many of you would say it's not a masculine virtue, it's just a normal virtue? It's like men and women both. See, I like it. That's boldness right there. She's like, I saw everybody raise their hands, and she was like, I disagree. That's good. Good, that's what we're going to talk about. So we were going to get to there eventually to think about how does courage relate to our masculinity and our femininity. But to start with, I need to set the stage by first talking a little bit about what we are as human beings, then defining courage, what do we mean by that, and then we'll get into how it's related to our sexuality. So first thing here is about what it means to be human. So as a human being, here's just some rough and ready bullet points about what it means to be human. Human beings are a combination of body and soul, composition of body and soul. So both of those are essential to being human. So the separation of the soul and body that happens at death is alien to your nature. It is not the way God designed you to be. So we're not like the ancient Greeks. We don't think that the soul is the real me imprisoned in a body and oh, for the day when I get free. Instead, God designed us. He formed Adam from the dust of the earth and breathed the breath of life, and the man became a living being. That Adam was made a living being, body and soul together. Your body, this is how we categorize things, right? Your body has 5 senses, right? Touch, taste, sight, smell, and hearing. You got your 5 senses by which you take in data from the world, and then you have a soul. So soul here, we're talking about that interior animating principle of your body that has 2 faculties. This is how we break it down, 2 faculties. You've got, shorthand, we often say mind and heart. Get your mind and heart. Older theologians are going to talk about the intellect and your will. So you have an intellect, that's the faculty, the power by which you perceive things, understand things, think about things, evaluate things. That's the intellect power in your soul. And then you've got the will, which is the part that chooses, desires or hates, love, that sort of thing. So that's you, your body, soul. Soul has 2 faculties, okay? However, theologians, when they really dig into this, start to speak in terms of different levels of that animating principle and how it relates to the body. So when you think about you, at the bottom, so think of tiers, levels. We're going to have 3 of them. At the bottom, you've got your bodily processes, which are animated by life, like breathing. Okay, so breathing. Digesting your food, which you're all doing right now. Pumping blood, growing, all of these things are things that your body does, animated, only does it if it's alive, by your soul, and it's the part of you that you share with all forms of life, like trees grow. So like older theologians call this vegetative soul because vegetables have it too, okay? So this is the part that you share with all life, and it's automatic. You don't think about it. You can't stop yourself from doing it. It's just going to happen. Okay. At the top level is what I just said we normally think about when we think about the soul, which is the mind and heart, which includes that intellect that perceives and understands and reasons, and then the will, which desires, loves, hates, and chooses. Okay. This is where if that lower level is what makes us like all life, the highest level is what makes us like God and angels. Okay, they have those things. They have that higher level. God has a mind and a heart. Angels have minds and hearts in that sense. And so it's what makes us rational agents, moral agents. That's at that other level. Okay. Now, at that middle level is the one we typically don't think about, but is actually really important for thinking through sanctification and what it means to be human. And this is the level, older theologians called this sense perception and sense appetite, but since nobody wants to talk about that, this is the level, the Bible I think calls this actually the body or flesh. Body or flesh. This is not the automatic process part. When you say body, not the automatic process part, but it's the bodily dimension animated by the soul that where your semi-voluntary impulses reside, or what the Bible calls your passions. It's the level of passions. Okay, so this middle level is really tied to your body. We can divide it into a perceiving power and a desiring power. But it's where we talk about the flesh with its passions and desires, okay? Or the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. So there you can hear in that text in 1 Timothy, passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. Or you're not enslaved to the body to make you obey its passions, right? You'll not be enslaved to sin so that it makes you obey your passions. So there's a way in which this is what accounts for internal conflict that we have sometimes, right? Both for Christians and non-Christians, actually. So non-Christians will sometimes do things that then they disapprove of, right? They impulsively do something and they think, I hate that I'm that way. They might be addicted to porn and not like it. And there's no Spirit of God in their heart. So how do we account for this conflict? Well, that higher part, intellect and will, is at war with that lower impulsive level, that semi-rational, like I just want it, I'm just gonna grab it, I'm gonna go for it. And you don't have to be a Christian to have conflict there. Now, as Christians, we have conflict because that higher level has been born again, renewed by the Spirit of God through the preaching of the Word. And now the war is between the Holy Spirit and the flesh, not just the mind and the flesh, right? So this is actually that middle level. Maybe think of it as the part of you that you share with animals. It's like animals don't reason. They don't have intellect and will. They don't choose the way you do. But if a rabbit sees a wolf, it runs. It perceives and then impulsively goes, right? Your dog can be trained, okay? It doesn't have a reason and a will like you do. It's not made in God's image. It doesn't have that highest level, but it has some kind of intelligence, right? Sentience. It's able to respond to stimuli and it can be trained and cultivated. You have that too. You have that middle tier, okay? So I want to set it up that way to then say, the title of the conference is Gendered Virtue. So what is virtue? What do we mean by virtue? Well, virtue is the excellence or perfection of something. So like a diamond, the virtue of the diamond is when it's been cut and polished and it shines. Or moral virtue is a perfection of our will, that highest level, when it's able to subdue its passions. Okay? So virtue is about the training and the cultivation of the mind over the passions. That's how virtue works. That's a well-ordered soul, when all of the different parts, top to bottom, are in order. So your mind, highest level, is set on Christ and obedient to God, and because of that is able to subdue, master, govern, steward, shepherd, you pick the word, your passions, which can be unruly, right? They see things and just want it, right? Or they see things and just hate it. They see things and just fear it. They think, so there's your passions. And when your mind is able to, by your will, subdue the passions and habituate them over time, we say that's virtue. That's a virtue. So that's virtue. It's the habitual exercise of good inclinations and desires which subdue our impulsive passions. That's virtue. Okay. So with that as background, that's how we are humans. Let's think about courage. And I brought that. I did that preface to say here's two very base kind of passions: desire and fear. Okay, desire and fear. And courage involves the intersection of these different passions and a hierarchy of them. So there's a kind of double vision that happens when we think about courage. So think about this. Okay, what does courage mean? Well, courage says there's an objective danger out there, something out there in the world that's dangerous. That dangerous thing does what? What does it cause inside of me? It causes fear. So the objective danger out there causes in here fear, right? Anxiety, you pick your word. Fear, anxiety about that. That's the passion of fear. It kind of just falls upon us. We see the scary thing, and then it's just there. Grabs you by the throat sometimes, okay? That's one level, double vision. One eye is looking at that. The other side, though, when courage is in play, is that there's also an objective good out there, something that's good and desirable, usually on the other side of that danger. And now your will says, I want that. I value that. That's important to me. And when that deeper desire, higher desire for that greater good subdues and masters that fear of the danger, you have courage. That's what it is. So yeah, that seems a little abstract. Okay, so when, if you came home, if you have kids and you wake up in the middle of the night and you smell smoke and you run downstairs and you realize there's a fire, and so you grab one of the kids and you run outside and you think your husband's grabbing the other kid, and you get outside and you realize, oh no, one of the kids is still inside, okay? There's the fire, objective danger, okay? What does it produce? Naturally, instinctively, impulsively, without much thought at all, fear. But my kid's in there, and there's no way you're keeping me out here. My desire for them and their good, that's the good, overcomes the fear so that I run back in, grab the kid, and make it to safety. Or not, right? That's how courage works. Courage is a habitual self-possession. So this is that mastery idea, the higher mastering the lower, that overcomes fear through the power of a deeper desire for a greater good. Say it again. A habitual self-possession, self-mastery, that overcomes fear through the power of a deeper desire for a greater good. Which means that courage can kind of manifest in two different ways. Think about two different expressions of courage. On the one hand, courage strains towards what is good in the face of risk or danger. So we take a risk, okay? It gives and hazards all in the face of uncertainty. I don't know how this is going to go. That's a little bit scary, but I'm going to take the risk. And so we call this risk-taking or daring. That could be a kind of courage. Okay, so you think about somebody, when a soldier charges up the hill to take the hill in the face of enemy fire, right? He's risking something to go reach out and grab something, okay? On the other hand, courage clings to a good that it already possesses in the face of pain or pleasure. Okay, so this is not, I'm going to get the good. It's like I already got it, and I'm just not going to let go, even though there's something painful coming, and I'm going to take the hit here, and that's scary. There's fear that makes me want to drop it, leave the good aside in order to save myself, and I'm not going to let go because I desire it, okay? It resists the impulse to retreat or to flee in the face of hardship, difficulty, pain, even death. It also, even courage, refuses to be drawn away by the promise of lesser reward. So I've got something good. There's a way in which courage is involved when another lesser good pops up and wants to lead you there. And courage, or fortitude, in this form, fortitude, says, no, I'm clinging to the other good. So again, the two forms here is one is forward movement, go take the hill, and the second is immovability. I'm going to keep the hill that I've already taken. I'm not going to get bowled over. In both cases, courage avoids the two ditches. So with all virtues, this is Aristotelian sort of virtue stuff, but basically the virtue is in between two errors. And usually it's an excess or a defect. It's an excess or defect. So if you lack courage, if you have a defect, if you don't have enough of it, what do we say you are? A coward. Okay, it's a coward, right? So cowardice is so courage is the opposite of cowardice, because cowardice shrinks back from danger, it succumbs to fear, refuses to take risks, retreats in the face of pain and difficulty. That's cowardice, okay? At the same time, what if you have an excess of courage, too much of it, so it's overpowered, what do you call that? Rashness or recklessness, that's right. So there, you've got risk-taking involved, but it's not governed. It's not, so courage properly is guided by wisdom and right reason, telling you what's truly good, what's truly fearful. So that's what courage does. Courage distinguishes between necessary and unnecessary risks. So a man can risk his life for a thrill. He scales a cliff without a rope, skydives out of an airplane. And you could say there's a kind of courage involved there, but the kind of courage is more of the thrill-seeking kind that just likes the buzz of overcoming the fear, and it's not the virtue of courage in the same way. Okay, that's different than if he scales a building in order to get in and save somebody's life, right? There's a virtue there. So the reason for your risk matters. And it's important to stress here that courage always arises in that context of fear. So sometimes it's like you think, I don't fear anything. Well, if that was literally true, you're not going to have courage either. So you can imagine, like if this was nighttime or foggy or something, and I was just, and here's the edge of a cliff, but it's foggy, so I can't see. I don't know where I'm at, and I'm just kind of dancing around here on the edge, right? I'm actually objectively in danger of dying, but I'm oblivious to it, and therefore you wouldn't say that I'm being courageous, right? Now, if the fog clears and all of a sudden I see it and I still balance and I'm going to go down the edge there because my kid's paralyzed up against the wall, can't move, and I've got to go get him, now I know the danger, I know the risk, I see the good, I'm going to go get him. Now courage is in play because the danger's there and I know it, because fear is present. So courage overcomes fear. So here's my summary of courage, just baseline. Courage involves a double vision. It sees both the danger or hardship before us as well as the reward or good beyond it. It sees both. Courage arises in the midst of that internal conflict because of that hardship, fear of pain or desire for pleasure, aversion to evil and movement toward good. These create the context for courage because fear and desire are inescapable, and courage arranges our fears, right? Fear God first, don't fear man. You're gonna have courage in the face of opposition. So courage, again, is a stable habit of the heart that masters the passions, especially of fear, through the power of a superior desire. So that's the basic courage. And Lewis says about courage isn't simply one of the virtues. He says it's not just one of them. You got wisdom, you've got temperance, you've got love, joy, peace, you've got all these different virtues. Courage isn't just one of those, but instead it's the form of every virtue at its testing point. Okay? It's the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means at the point of highest reality. If you're only chaste, that's a virtue. Chastity is a virtue. If you're only honest, that's a virtue. If you're only noble, when conditions are easy, you're not really those things at all, right? Those virtues need to be combined with courage when it's actually hard, right? When it's actually hard, when there's real danger of being, say, ostracized or shunned by people that you want, whose approval you want, but am I going to do the right thing or am I going to listen to peer pressure? That takes courage, right? That takes courage to maintain your honesty. So courage is the form of virtue at the testing point. Courage takes risks in the form of daring, but doesn't fall into recklessness. It endures hardship in the form of fortitude, but doesn't fall into passivity or cowardice. And here's the thing about courage. Whenever you see it, whenever you encounter real, genuine courage, people find it unmistakably beautiful. It's a beautiful virtue, okay? Anytime, this is Christians, non-Christians, when we encounter that virtue, we think, how marvelous, how noble, how glorious. It's a lovely virtue, and we all admire. Now, that's courage at a common level. What makes it Christian? It's a lot to say about this, but I'll just stress one thing. What makes courage Christian is the greater good that you're clinging to or pursuing and that overcomes fear, that greater good is God himself. That's what makes it Christian courage. Not just the approval of my buddies on the in the battlefield, or not just the accolades that I'll get if I do the hard thing. That's worldly and could be fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But it's not Christian courage unless the greater good that you're seeking, the greater good that you're pursuing, that overcomes every fear, is Christ himself. Okay? He is the joy that's set before us. And so this is why the Bible, when it commends courage, it says stuff like this. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Right? The argument there is that virtue, that strength, like Pastor Toby talked about earlier, and the courage that's just in the book of Joshua, Deuteronomy, Joshua, just boom, it's like on repeat. Be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. Because why? What's the thing that's going to make that happen? What's the animating thing? What's that good that I'm after? God's with you. You're clinging to him. What can man do to you? What can the Canaanites do? What can Jericho do? You don't have to worry about the giants in the land. God is with you. He's the greater good. I'm clinging to him, and therefore I overcome every fear. Christ is the good we cling to in the face of danger and pain. Okay, so that's baseline courage. Now we get to this question of sexuality and gendered virtue. Courage has often been regarded as a distinctly masculine virtue. So for example, Aristotle said that the height of courage or fortitude is the fortitude expressed in the face of death in battle. So he said, there's lots of places you can be courageous, but the highest place, best place is on a battlefield, and that's where you see courage at its highest point. Well, if that's the case, if war is necessary for that highest expression of courage, then of course courage is going to be closely linked to men, because men are the ones who fight the battles. Men are the ones who called to fight in wars. But even beyond that, the association between men and courage is owing partly to our tendencies as men and women. Toby got into this a little bit earlier. Men by nature are more prone to take risks. They thrive on it. They enjoy it. They seek out danger voluntarily. And as a result, they frequently find themselves in situations which call for risk-taking and aggressive valor and pioneering spirit, going where nobody else has gone, doing what nobody else has done. Women, on the other hand, tend to be more risk-averse, more safety-conscious, valuing security more than men, though not exclusively, but in general. Those are kind of different tendencies, and there's real good reasons why that's the case, why men are built to take the risks, and women are built to orient towards security and safety, and they can complement each other well. So because of this, courage, that firmness that firmness of mind, habit of heart that overcomes fear through that deeper desire for the greater good, it looks different in many different situations, okay? So that, for example, sometimes you don't go looking for danger. Danger comes looking for you. Pain and hardship, you don't have to go find it. Guys will go find it. But it's going to find you in a fallen world no matter what. And both men and women, therefore, find themselves in situations where there's danger out there and fear in here. And courage is called for. Glad-hearted courage is the order of the day for both men and women. At the same time, certain forms of courage, that kind of risk-taking, forward-looking, go seek out danger and conquer it, will more frequently be displayed by men because men go looking for it. And they find themselves in situations that call for it. Okay, so this is a matter of opportunity and context. That's why it's associated with men. Women can be risk-takers, and they can pioneer, and they can show valor, but they don't find themselves in those situations as often, and therefore the link is made between courage and masculinity. This is one reason why we make that link. At the same time, this is a kind of like quantitative element, so it's like, how often are you going to have to show that virtue in that way? And it's like, well, men will more because of how men are wired. Beyond this, though, there's also a qualitative difference, and I think this is where we're going to camp for a bit. So, virtues are human. Okay, all virtues, I think, are human. They're common to men and to women. Okay? But like every aspect of our lives, they're inflected by our sexuality. So it's common, but inflected. You say, what do you mean? So inflection, you guys know what inflection means? Inflection could refer to the way, like if you say a sentence like, what are you doing? You could inflect different parts of that sentence and subtly change the meaning. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing, right? So different, it changes, what are you doing, right? That signifies curiosity. What are you doing is more of an accusation, okay? Like, the same words inflected differently, okay? That's inflection, just a little bend in the meaning. Same words, different little bend. Or you could think about, so pitch of your voice, tone of your voice inflects things. Or think about, English doesn't work this way very often, but other languages do. It's like in Spanish, hermano and hermana both refer to siblings. So there's a common thing, right, the root, that at the end is inflected masculine or feminine. Okay, lots of languages work this way. So there's a common thing, sibling, but is it a brother or a sister? Well, it's inflected one way or the other, okay? That idea, virtues are like that. Really everything's kind of like that. Okay, there's a little bend, a little directional thing. So it's human, but it's bent in certain directions because we're men and women all the way down. So language here is reflecting reality. So courage, back to courage. Courage is courage, whether in men or women, whether it's risk-taking or endurance, fortitude, whether it's aggressive valor or submissive fortitude. Courage is courage. It's human. But because we're men and we're men and women all the way down, it will be embodied and expressed in distinctly masculine and feminine ways. This is gendered virtue. And so maybe one way to illustrate this, we could also talk about the consequences of that virtue. So for men, cowardice, a lack of courage, is both ungodly and unmanly. It's ungodly, it's not faithfulness to God. You should have the virtue. You have the vice of cowardice. But it's also unmanly, okay? On the other hand, for women, a lack of courage is ungodly, but it's not necessarily unwomanly. You say, well, how does that work? Well, because as the weaker vessel, shrinking back in the face of real danger is understandable. It's what you would expect. It's in some ways how you were built, right? Therefore, courage matters more for men because not only their godliness, but their manhood is at stake in the presence or absence of courage. Okay, for the sake of their gravitas, their dignity, their honor, their status. There's earlier in the Q&A when we talked about what attracts women, for example, or what earns the respect of other men. Okay, a coward is neither attractive to women nor respected by other men. Okay, but a woman who shrinks back from in danger isn't necessarily regarded as unwomanly. She's not acting like a real woman. No, she's acting like a woman. She may be acting like a fearful, ungodly woman by shrinking back, but she's not acting. I'll come back to that in a minute because there's a counterpart to that idea. So the consequences are different. So the scriptures then give us many examples of masculine courage. Let's talk with the men first. Good example of this connection is in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 4. The Philistines are making war on Israel. Israelites are defeated. They're trying to figure out what happened. And they realize, oh, we didn't bring the ark. Silly us. What were we thinking? We forgot to bring our magic box into battle. And so they call the priest and say, hey, bring the ark and bring the magic box, and we're going to go back into battle because that's how we'll win. The Philistines hear this, and it says they quake with fear. Fear falls upon them because they've heard stories, right? They've heard about what happens when that magic box shows up. They've heard what God did to the God of the Hebrews had done to the Egyptians and to the Canaanites, and they fear lest the same thing happen to us, but they try to encourage one another, and this is what they say. Take courage, O Philistines, and be men. Hear it? Take courage and be men, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews. Be men and fight. So you can hear the links. Taking courage, being a man, fighting in battle, those are inextricably linked. And in this particular instance, because Israel is treating the ark like a magic box and therefore not being faithful to God, Israel gets whipped again. Okay, the Philistines encourage one another and defeat Israel. Of course, later in the book of Samuel, we get the classic example of masculine courage in the Bible, right, with David. Goliath of Gath, the great Philistine warrior, towering in height, massive in strength, battle-tested, well-armed, defying Israel's armies, challenging anybody to single combat. Who's going to have the courage to face me? And instead, it intimidates all the men of Israel. King Saul and Israel are, quote, dismayed and greatly afraid, 1 Samuel 17:11. The passion of fear, right? This is that fear just overwhelms them, and they follow that passion. They flee. David, the young shepherd boy, shows up visiting his older brothers, hears Goliath's mockery, hears his defiance, and he's like, what gives here, guys? What's going on? This is shaming not only us and our fathers, but it's shaming our God. This is unmanly cowardice. You're not acting like men. And therefore, he turns to his brothers and his Israelites and says, let no man's heart fail because of this man, Goliath. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. I'm in. I'm in. Let's go. And note, this is an eagerness, a willingness to run into danger, to take a risk. Saul says, dude, you're too young. You don't know how to fight. David says, whoa. I'm a shepherd. And I've had to learn courage since I was a little boy. I've learned courage and violence from a young age because I had to protect my flocks from lions and bears. And as he describes it, you can hear that this isn't just natural courage for David, it's Christian courage, biblical courage. He says, on the one hand, he says, I was the one who struck the lion and delivered the lamb from its mouth. David is the one who had struck down both lions and bears, and therefore I'll strike down this uncircumcised Philistine who defies the armies of the living God. I've done this before. Okay, been there, done that, have the t-shirt, I'm in. Don't worry about it, Saul. Okay? On the other hand, he acknowledges that it was not his own strength and prowess at work, but God himself. The Lord who delivered me from the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from his hand. So on the one hand, I killed them. I killed the lions. I killed the bear. I'm going to kill the tall guy. I did it. And yet, it's the Lord who delivered me from the lion and the bear and who will deliver me from the man. That's biblical courage, okay? It's grounded in the Lord's strength and favor. Then, of course, you have the battle itself. He goes out to meet Goliath, starts taunting the little shepherd boy, and David says, you come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hand. Got it? God will, so I'm relying on God. You're the danger, you're the threat, and it's my hand, he says, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. So, and then he does. God makes good on that promise, and David makes good on his threat. So here again, the form of courage is aggressive, risk-taking, martial, combat, struggle. This is masculine courage. Of course, we can move out from the Bible, and you get examples of this in our literature and our movies. So we all love these scenes, right? Braveheart, Gladiator, Lord of the Rings. All of them are going to have that scene that the dudes love. Men resonate with the moment in the movie, battle lines drawn up, leader stands before his troops and is trying to encourage them, like place courage in their hearts by a speech. And they typically end, right, with the leader charging into battle at the head of the men, exercising that bravery and valor. Okay? The original of this in terms of literature, right, you got some older examples like Horatio at the Bridge, but at least in English literature, is Shakespeare's Henry V. Okay, Shakespeare's Henry V. And I teach Shakespeare, so here we go. In this, there's a scene in the middle of that play where King Henry is leading his men against the French armies in a quest to claim the throne of these lands that he's entitled to. And so he's besieging the city of Harfleur, and he utters the sort of first example of that classic battle speech that's reappeared in all of our modern movies. And in doing so, he's expressing and embodying what masculine courage looks like. So here we go. And because it's Shakespeare, there will be accents. So I'm going to probably break it up. Well, I'll let you decide. Do it straight through and then talk, or break it up as I go? Straight through? All right, you called it. All right, here we go. Once more unto the breach, dear friends. Once more a closed wallet with our English dead. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews. Summon up the blood. Disguise fair nature in hard, favored rage. Now, lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let it pry through the portage of the head like a brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it, as fearfully as does a galled rock o'erhang in Judea's confounded bay, swilled with the wild and wastful ocean. Now set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide, hold hard the breath, and bend up every spirit to his full height. On you, noblest English, whose blood is fet from fathers of war proof, fathers who, like so many Alexanders, have in these parts from morn till even fought, and sheathed their swords for lack of argument. Dishonor not your mothers. Let us attest that those whom you called fathers did beget you. Be copy now to men of grosser blood, and teach them how to war. And you, good yeomen, whose limbs were made in England, show us here the mettle of your pasture. Let us swear that you are worth your breeding, which I doubt not, for there is none of you so mean and base that hath not noble luster in your eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirits, and upon this charge cry, God for Harry, England, and St. George. There we go. Okay? There we go. Okay. In that speech, he does a number of different things. Okay? Note at the beginning where he says, in peacetime, there are certain virtues that are appropriate. Modesty, stillness, humility, calmness, tranquility. In peacetime, right, a man ought to be able to be in a court and not pick fights with everybody. Those are appropriate. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then it's tiger time. Okay? Or in the biblical phrase, the righteous are as bold as a lion. Okay, imitate the action of the tiger. And then he describes sort of the bodily, it gets down, it's like, what are your eyes doing, right? What's your brow doing, right? Are you bending up every spirit? Are you bowing up, right? To intimidate, right? That's why they tell you, I forget which animals. There's certain animals that they're like, don't run, get big, right? And it's like, that's the idea here in this battle, right? The whole body is engaged in imitating the tiger, flaring nostrils, muscles taut, ready to pounce. And in doing so, what's he doing? He's showing soldiers, imitate the tiger by imitating me. Okay. And then he appeals to the noblest English. You guys get to be the noblemen. They get to be the commoners. So you guys were the noblemen, and they should not just imitate tigers, but imitate your ancestors. Your fathers were noble. Your fathers fought in battle. They fought from dawn till dusk, from sunrise to sunset, until there was no one left to fight, till the battlefield was ours. And so the call to courage is a call to live up to the honor and glory of their fathers and your mothers. It's about bearing those ancestral names well, living up to their reputation. And then the goal is you, as the leaders, are to spread courage to the commoners. You have to be courageous because cowardice is contagious. The Bible talks about this actually in the book of Deuteronomy, and the law is about warfare. The rule is, if any man is afraid, leave, lest he make the heart of his companions melt. It's nothing worse than a battlefield than looking over and seeing one of your fellows who was standing with you in the shield wall bolt for it, to flee in cowardice. So if that's you, you think that's you, I don't want you. I'd rather have a smaller army of courageous men than a larger army with some cowards who causes the dam to break. So, right, you, noblest English, have to set a good example for the good yeomen, the commoners, and you may be commoners, but you're Englishmen. Okay, and that matters. That says something. And in fact, your courage makes you not mean and base, but you have a noble luster in your eyes. There's something in your eyes that's noble. There's no commoners on this battlefield. There's only kings. And then he says, rise to the glory of your country. You're standing like greyhounds in the slips. You're ready to go. You're locked in. Ready, boys? God for Harry, England, and St. George. Boom, and into the breach. Okay, this is a picture of masculine courage. It's manifested in a kind of aggressive valor, a willingness to take risks, overcome obstacles on the way to achieving a great and glorious goal. And it's contagious. It's contagious. Final example of masculine courage, moving to Narnia. I think actually that this quote that I quote all the time about masculinity, I think Lewis, in writing this in The Horse and His Boy, was actually inspired by that speech from Henry V. I think that's where he got it. I think that Henry V was is the background for what he says here from King Loon to his sons when he's describing what it means to be a king. This is what it means to be a king. To be first in every desperate attack. Hear it? Let's go, boys. To be last in every desperate retreat. And when there's hunger in the land, as must be now and again in bad years, to wear finer clothes and laugh louder at a scantier meal than any man in your land. First in, last out, laughing loudest. That's what it means to be a king. Okay? Kingship is about that fortitude and courage that says, if there's a sacrifice to be borne, I'm going to bear it first. If there's a burden, I'm in first, and I'm last out. Okay? I'm going to protect my people to the very end. Okay? And then, I think this is significant that in Lewis's quote, there's a famine in the land. What's that? There's an obstacle. There's a danger. We might starve. What does that danger produce? It produces fear. Fear would be the emotion that you would expect. Are we going to survive? Is my family going to die? Are we going to be able to eat? And the king says, scanty meal, right? It's just beans and rice again. Okay? And he says, stands up in front of the table with all the people knowing this is the last one. We don't have any more. And he says, let's give thanks to God for all of his bounty to us. Isn't it great? And laughs louder at a scantier meal than anybody else. That's masculinity. That's masculine courage. It's a glad-hearted stability, a manifest hopefulness in the face of hardship. Lewis actually, in his prose writings, connects the laughter and gaiety and wholeheartedness, he calls it the natural accompaniment of courage. Courage is not a dour, gloomy, angsty thing. It's the danger is real, the fear is palpable, but true courage is all in, wholehearted, and therefore rejoices in the labor. We see a vision of this, I think, in the Psalms when it talks about Psalm 19. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man or a gibborim, a warrior who runs his course with joy, right? What's on his face as he's running into battle? A big smile. I'm protecting my people. I'm doing what I was built to do. So, we can think of other examples of this sort of courage. Remember Jimmy Braddock in the movie Cinderella Man, right? We think about courage maybe as him getting in the ring with Max Baer at the end, and there's courage there for sure. But the actual moment that I think about in that movie most often is when his family has very little food, and his daughter wakes up, and he's got his breakfast sitting there. And his daughter eats her breakfast, and then says, "Mama, I want some moa." And Jimmy says, "Oh, Gracie, I had a dream last night that we were eating at the Ritz, and I had a steak that was as big as your head, and a plate piled high of mashed potatoes, and I ate every last bit of it, so I woke up this morning, and I'm actually kind of full. Here, have mine." And then gets up and goes to work with an empty stomach, but a full heart and a family that is stable, okay? That's beautiful. Same thing, Life is Beautiful. Seen Life is Beautiful, the movie? Holocaust comedy. Serious, that's what it is. Life is Beautiful, Jojo Rabbit, 2 Holocaust comedies. In that one, Roberto Benigni portrays Guido, an Italian Jew, and he and his son his family are sent to a concentration camp. And in order to preserve his young son's innocence in the face of this horrific evil, he pretends that the whole thing is a game. And that if his son will play hide and seek, and if he wins the game of hide and seek, he will win a tank. But he can't cry or complain at all. If he cries or complains, he loses points and he won't get the tank. And so, Josue, remember, you can't cry, you can't complain, and whenever I tell you to hide, you have to hide. So throughout the movie, the Germans are, doing their thing. It's this horrific thing. And at the very end of the movie, he maintains the game all the way through, even to the end, when a German officer is leading him to his execution with Josue hiding in a box. We can see through. And when he walks by the box, he knows he's going to be shot. He walks by the box like that, waving at this box, so that his son isn't afraid. So that his son, right, he's laughing loudest at the scantiest meal that will ever happen for the sake of his son. These are images of masculine courage in the face of war, death, hardship. And they're called for us as men to lead our homes, to lead our churches, to lead out into the world with joyful sacrifice, glad-hearted valor, risk-taking, and happy daring in whatever God gives to us. First in, last out, laughing loudest. Now I say that, so courage is a masculine virtue, right? Not so fast. Among the Greeks, courage and fortitude were especially masculine virtues because they associated them with war, as many of our examples just did. But Christianity transformed the classical virtue. It baptized it, and instead elevated the endurance of suffering and evil as the pinnacle of fortitude. So not just the physical strength and valor on a battlefield, but the highest form was martyrdom. And what this transformation did, following from Christ's example on the cross, was to transform courage into the virtue that even the weakest can express. Because the weakest may not be able to win a battle. They may be hiding in a box, but they can still be courage and they can still go to their death singing. That shift in emphasis allows us to see courage in other places. It's no longer the province merely of strong, able-bodied men. Instead, we can see it in the stability of soul and patient endurance of evil that all of us are called to make, including our women. And in particular, the Apostle Peter expresses precisely this view of courage in his exhortation to Christian wives. So in 1 Peter 3, wives are to be subject to their husbands, even when their husbands are unbelieving and disobedient. Which is kind of scary. There's a danger. That's a danger that will produce fear. How should a wife respond to that? Rather than adorning themselves externally with the physical trappings of beauty, Peter says, adorn yourselves with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. Now, gentle and quiet spirit, there's been a lot of, I think, misunderstanding about this. Oftentimes it's regarded as a sort of personality trait, as though God prefers introverts to extroverts, at least in women. But there's nothing inherently virtuous in being a shy wallflower. This isn't a personality trait. A gentle and quiet spirit is about the mental fortitude, emotional strength, and spiritual composure. This sort of woman has a well-ordered soul, one that is composed and content in her calling and station. That's what a gentle and quiet spirit is. How do we know this? Well, as Michael Foster, who's not here, has argued, the opposite of the quiet spirit is the loud one. And the book of Proverbs has much to say about the loud woman, the forbidden woman, the bad lady, as we talked about earlier. The loud woman, the bad lady is loud and wayward. Loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home, Proverbs 7:11. The Apostle Paul issues a similar warning about women who are idlers, going about from house to house, and not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies saying what they should not. They're loud. They're not attending to what's theirs. They're in everybody else's business. This is the opposite. This gentle and quiet is the opposite of that. The opposite of such loud, discontented, wayward women is the ones, according to 1 Timothy 5, who marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander. Now, earlier I mentioned that a man's cowardice in battle, for example, is both ungodly and unmanly. Here, we see that a gentle and quiet spirit, a submissive disposition, matters more for women, just as that mattered more for men. So, for example, if you're in a high school class, and you've got a young boy, a high school boy, who's being rowdy, loud, and disrespectful in class, he's being ungodly, but he's not necessarily being unmanly. He's testing boundaries. He's trying to see which hills he could take, okay? It's immature masculinity, and there's sin all through it, but it's entirely appropriate. But if a young woman is rowdy, loud, and disrespectful, she's being both ungodly and unwomanly. Like the coward, she's lacking a virtue that is appropriate and proper for her sex. She's lacking the imperishable beauty of the gentle and quiet spirit that God's sight is precious. The next verse in 1 Peter explicitly links gentle and quiet spirit to submission to one's husband. 1 Peter. So the gentle, imperishable and quiet spirit, God's sight is precious. For, he says, this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. So in verse 4, the adornment is the gentle and quiet spirit. In verse 5, it's Sarah-like submission to one's husband. That's the equation. And then in verse 7, Peter connects all of this, again, to courage. This is what I don't want you to miss. And you, young ladies, old ladies, all ladies, you are her children. You're Sarah's children. If you do good, listen, and do not fear anything that is frightening. There's courage. It confirms and expands that vision of courage that we've been talking about. We draw it together and we see that Sarah here is presented as a model of courage. Sarah's children don't fear anything that's frightening. It's a matter, again, of inner fortitude, mental strength. And that's the heart. It's the hidden person of the heart that then expresses itself how? In submission to her husband, in honor, in the way she speaks about him. Where does it come from? Well, according to the passage, right, it comes from a vibrant and living hope in God. Like Joshua and the people of Israel, Sarah and her daughters must be strong and courageous because they know and believe that God is with them and for them. What's more, that hope in God firmly believes that hardship, trial, and danger are God's instruments for our good. It clings to God and thereby subdues the passions of fear and anxiety about the future. The things that are actually frightening. Don't fear anything it is frightening. It is frightening. But you need not fear it because you're hoping in God. We could connect this actually in 1 Peter back to an earlier passage, not necessarily about the gender, but you can see the connection. 1 Peter 1, listen to this. Peter says, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Notice those phrases, right? Preparing your minds for action. What is this? It's literally girding up the loins of your mind. It's battle imagery. It's like put on your big boy pants, okay? Rolling up the sleeves of your mind, getting ready to get to work, okay? Peter calls this, he's calling these people to get ready to do some serious mental work, heart work, the kind that takes effort. So this isn't like, it's not roll out of your bed in your pajamas work. It's get your clothes on, make sure your shoes are tied, get your game face on, work. Prepare your minds for action. Then, being sober-minded. This is the opposite of drunkenness. Okay? Drunkenness, you remember, right? Impairs your perception, impairs your judgment, impairs your reaction times. So the opposite of drunkenness, sober-mindedness, is alertness, clarity, steadiness. So roll up the sleeves of your mind, get clear and steady, and then what? Set your hope fully on the grace of God that's coming. It's a future-oriented affection, a grasping for it, glad-hearted expectation of all of the good that God has planned for you. He's promised it's coming. We don't yet possess it, we hope for it. And Peter knows it's easy to be distracted, so you gotta roll the sleeves of your mind, put those blinders on, fix it on the coming grace of God, tidal wave of coming grace, get ready. And he grounds this later in that same passage in the gospel. And Sarah then, 2 chapters later, is the model for that. She's the holy woman who hoped in God and does not fear anything that's frightening. Her gentle and quiet spirit isn't a matter of personality or passivity. It took grace-wrought effort for Sarah to subdue her fears. Because here's the deal, right? Yeah, it's a fearful thing to face Goliath. It's also a fearful thing to follow Abraham. Right? You imagine the conversation? Abraham was out in the field in Ur of the Chaldees, comes home and says, honey, I just heard from God. And he says to come home and get you and to pack up all of our stuff and all of our people, right, our household, and to go. Oh, okay. Go where? I don't know yet. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, I don't know. No idea. He just said, pack it up and go. Yeah, but what direction? Don't know. Do you want to go ask him? Right? Like there's going to be that kind of questions, right? This is scary, right? Our country and our kindred are here. Like generations of our family have been buried in that cemetery, and you want to go where? You want to do what? Because of who? And Abraham says, let's go. And Sarah says, all right, I'm going to hope in God, and I'm going to follow a fallible man. So when you consider Sarah's life, following Abraham when God called him to leave, or the perpetual risk of tyrannical kings who are always trying to add her to their harems, right? The number of, how many times does she get, brought into a brothel? Because predatory men are accumulating for themselves many wives. Or the danger from local warlords, like the ones who captured Lot and his family, right? Battles happen, and then it's like Lot just gets taken, his whole household. There's a lot that's scary. Many things that are frightening. And Sarah says, I'm with you, honey. You're my Lord. I'm following. Because of her hope in God, she conquered those fears, and she maintained a gentle, quiet spirit, sober-minded spirit in submission to God first, and then to her husband. And that's where we see that feminine inflection of her courage, right? Her courage did not manifest as the aggressive valor of the warrior. Like when Lot and his family were captured, Sarah did not strap on her sword to go deal with it. She did not join the 318 fighting men to rescue them. Instead, she simply honored her husband by her speech and her actions, calling him Lord. And it's significant. I think what's one of the most significant things about Peter's use, Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. Where's Peter getting that? Well, there's only one time where that shows up. It's in Genesis 18:12. It's when God has promised to Abraham that Sarah's going to have a son, and Sarah's in the next room over, and overhears it, and it says, so Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I am worn out, and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? Okay. And what's remarkable about this is that Peter cites that, and it's just an unremarkable statement. You get the impression that's just how she talked, right? It wasn't like my Lord. It was none of that. It wasn't like that. It was simply like, yeah, he's He's Abraham, my Lord. I'm the lady of the house. He's the Lord of the house. He's my Lord. And are we going to have a kid? Are you crazy? That sounds insane. This is just the way that Sarah talks about her husband. And it testifies that she is a great and holy woman, one who hopes in God, honors her husband, and becomes a model of Christian courage. So, in light of all that, let's summarize. Courage is a stable habit of the heart that masters the passions, especially fear, through a superior desire for a greater good. Christian courage subdues that fear through desire and hope in God, in Christ. Courage is human. It's common to both sexes, but inflected in masculine and feminine ways. And whatever form it takes, whether it takes the form of that aggressive and martial valor, that risk-taking and daring, that fortitude that men have, or whether it takes the form of a gentle and quiet spirit, submitting and honoring one's husband, whatever form it takes, true courage, grounded by hope in God, subdues internal fears, faces external dangers, and is marvelous and beautiful in God's sight. Let's pray. Father, work it in us. You work in us that which is pleasing in your sight. And we know, Lord, that courage is very precious to you. It's a precious virtue. It works out from the heart and into our actions. So help us to grow up into maturity in Christ, to subdue our fears, to trust in you, to be strong and courageous because you're with us wherever you go. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.